This is a 1966 Mark III Ford Zodiac, and this is me desperately attempting to get the old girl to fire back into life after being abandoned for decades in the back of a workshop. Do you understand why I look to be in so much pain? You need to understand that I don't really have a clue what I'm doing. If I don't laugh, I'll cry. This is only the second classic car I've ever worked on. My name is Nino and I'm on a mission to teach myself car mechanics by buying rusty old bangers and fixing them up. I've got a small collection of basic tools and a lovely brown Haynes manual. I found this particular shiny example in the same place I always find them, the depths of eBay. She was languishing in a workshop in a tiny place called Withensea, and as you can see from the photos, she was sporting quite the layer of dust and grime. So I had a two birds, one stone kind of brainwave. Choose a rainy day to have her transported to me. And with this being a typical British summer, I had plenty of days to choose from. Dan, top bloke, gave her some 60 mile per hour in the rain treatment on the way back down to Essexshire. And as you can see, my plan worked well. This car is now just as fresh as the day that she rolled out of the showroom. Give or take a couple of blemishes here and there, of course. But on the back, This car was made right here in England, and like almost any motor car built in England in the 60s, it means that
with this car you're buying a different class of motoring.
And if by a different class of motoring you mean
rust, 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 completely obliterated seals, a cat on the parcel shelf, speed hole for extra accelerator travel, rust, then sure, a different class of motoring. And I'm sure it hasn't gone unnoticed either that there is a ratchet strap holding the bonnet down, which can only mean that the locking mechanism and the hinges are in perfect working order, because under here
you've got a magnificently powerful Ford engine.
Yes, magnificent. Yep, that's locked up.
And you've got the confidence and safety of front wheel disc brakes.
Yeah, they definitely don't work.
There were heatwave conditions all day and every day when this film was taken, but the Zephyr 4's twin-layer air conditioning kept everyone cool and comfortable. And then there's the all-round visibility.
I mean, I'm sitting on the broken wing mirror here.
The reclining front seats. Optional overdrive or automatic transmission.
Yep, that's stuck. So this was the top of the line, 2.5 litre straight six engine, got a single carburettor, and it put out a whopping 100 or to 109-ish brake horsepower. And I really do need to get in here and see quite how locked up this engine is. So you can see it there, it's just slipping on the belt. Before I delve right into that, just look at how complete this car is. It's actually, for the condition it's in, of course, is just remarkably complete. And it all looks really quite original. It doesn't even look at any stage like someone might have, you know, messed around with any of the wiring. It's all here. So that's good. So if I can just get this free, we might be in with a fighting chance. Introduction. Can I free the engine? So the first order of business was to check quite how badly this engine was locked up. I've only ever worked on one classic car before, and that engine was stuck solid. I never got it unseized. So my track record at this point isn't fantastic. No, nothing. Oh, don't do this to me. No, I feel like I'm rounding the bolt more than anything. Right at the very start with the biggest issue that you can encounter. Oh. Whoa. Way over full. Fuel. But fear not, because I had a plan that involved the world's quickest jack. Okay, so what I've done here is I've crawled underneath and I've pulled the starter motor out, and I think just somehow I'm just going to pry on the flywheel in there and hope that I can get this just to budge a tiny bit. Go on. Oh yes! I've been going at it for about 30 minutes. I've been through 360 degrees.
There must have been a little ridge with the piston ring stuck on the, maybe on one of the cylinder walls, but we appear to be free as a bird.
The next thing to suss out was electricity. And look, I didn't mean to make such a colossal fool out of myself so early on in the video, but you know, life isn't all sunshine and spark plugs, is it? Eagle-eyed viewers would already have caught at this point exactly what it is that I've done wrong. But if you haven't caught it, keep watching, it's going to be very clear very soon.
Let's twist the key and see what, if anything, happens. Nothing. Nothing is choking, spluttering, whirring, buzzing. This is where I start getting out of my depth entirely because I don't know the first thing about electronics.
But it's for moments like these that the trusty Haynes manual exists.
And so if I'm reading this Haynes manual correctly, that is a positive earth.
Look, I am a noob. This is all learning. I am now never going to make that mistake again. Although, never say never.
And so what happens now if I put the key in the ignition?
And so let's not forget that at this point, all I'm trying to do is get the starter motor to engage to turn the engine over. But as I'm turning the key, I'm not getting a single thing. And so this is where my attention turned to the solenoid. And so I whipped out the multimeter, did some tests, worked out that I'm getting 12 volts to the solenoid. But I very quickly worked out that this solenoid just isn't doing any solenoiding. So this point in the video marks the arrival of the hot cannon. I changed one of the battery terminals. Yes, just one. Why not two? Don't ask questions you don't want to know the answer to. And I'd also bought a new solenoid in advance, just in case. And so I fitted it. And then it was time to see if my hard work had paid off by turning the ignition key one more time. Nothing. Ah! What do I have to do? And then it kind of dawned on me, have I even checked to see if the solenoid is receiving any voltage from the ignition? So I whipped out the multimeter again, did some checks, and what do you know? The solenoid isn't getting any voltage from the ignition. Now either the wire to the ignition is broken, which I can't really get at anyway because it goes into a wiring loom, or the ignition itself is just a bit corroded. So I pulled it apart and that is exactly what I found. Lots of the terminals were really dirty, they were green, they were all gunked up. So I did my best to clean them, put the ignition back together and tried one more time.
Nothing. That is me twisting the key. Oh, marvellous.
But to be honest with you, now I know it's just the ignition that's a bit gammy on this car. It does mean that you can just send power straight from the battery to the solenoid with this funky little lead.
Yes. Okay, the engine does indeed spin over just nicely. Right. Okay, that starter doesn't have too much life in her, so I want to preserve her.
And look, with hindsight, that engine really doesn't sound too healthy at all, does it? But I was so caught up in the moment, my brain was whirring, just trying as hard as I can to figure out what was going on to notice that that engine was... So now it's time to start thinking about the fundamentals. Chapter 1. Spark! And as you can see here, these spark plugs were rotten. All of them were fouled, but even worse than that, all of them were just completely corroded at the tips.
And as I was in here taking the spark plugs out, I actually noticed that the dizzy cap was loose, and so I pulled it off. Eagle-eyed viewers might notice that only half of the rotor's there, the other half fell out. There it is, look, snapped off. So the very minimum in there, I'm going to need a new rotor arm, probably points, condenser, just kind of give it the works. You can see these plugs here as well. They've seen better days. The inside of that is, well, that's seen better days. That needs a lot of tidying up. There's a lot of corrosion in there. So I'm probably going to either tidy that up or just put a new cap on it, if I'm honest with you. So if we test the coil with primary winding, you have a look down here on the screen. You can see that we're getting 3 ohms. Which is absolutely bang on for what a primary winding should be. Right, so it looks like this old girl is going to have some new fresh parts thrown at her. At the bare minimum, we're going to need a coil, 5, maybe even 6 spark plugs, distributor cap, points, definitely a rotor arm. We're also going to need to change the oil. So I think the best thing for me to do right now is to just be get on with it. this is less than ideal, isn't it? Really should have just moved the jack. There's still time. No. On three. 1, 2, 3. Oh, this is a terrible idea. There's no fine control. There's no fine control. Nino, you complete moron. Wow. So the consequences of filling this right up to the brim of really thick, stodgy oil from a massive, great bottle is that as I was pouring it all in here and letting it fill right up, it's not pushing through the engine very quickly. And as you can see there, all it's done is just absolutely spewed out of the rocker cover. And it's gone all down the side of the block. It's gone all the way down there, dripping down there. It's come out of this side, it's pooled there. And it's basically just created one massive, great, horrible mess that I've now got to try and clean up. It also means that when I start this engine, if I start this engine, there's just going to be so much smoke with all that oil burning off. Also, the oil's not cheap. And leaking like that, I suppose, also doesn't say too much about the integrity of the rocker cover gasket, does it? And I think the next thing we need to move on to is air and fuel.
Chapter 2, Air and Fuel.
Now this is a Zenith.
Yeah, but hang on, wait, sorry, 1 second. You just threw the parts cannon at the ignition system. You did actually check to see if you've got spark, right? This is going to come back and bite me later. Just keep watching.
Now this is a Zenith something carburetor. What is it? It's got a little Ford, I don't know, I can't read it. It's a Zenith carburetor. I've got zero experience dealing with one. I've seen other people do things like this online, and they always say that you need to give the carburetor a little bit of a tickle just to get things inside loose, you know, maybe the needles and stuff. So hopefully that worked. If it didn't, maybe I could just hit it in completely random and arbitrary places, not with a hammer but with a wrench, and then wonder, maybe, hopefully, probably didn't, but if that did something. Now I have just sprayed penetrant all over this throttle linkage here, and I have managed to get that free, so that now moves. But one of the issues that I've got here is that there's supposed to be something bracing the gap from there to there, so that when this moves like that, this moves with it. So I'm going to have to get some kind of solution to bridge that gap to join these two bits of linkage together. But this also means now that I need to sort out some kind of fuel system. Now there's the fuel pump there. This is the fuel filter. I can see at the bottom of it there's just the most horrendous looking fuel. So I'm thinking what I might do is I might come off of this hose here straight into the pump, fit an inline fuel filter and connect this to an external fuel source. I also just pulled the top of the carb off. This is obviously the float, so I've filled this with some fresh fuel just to check that the float is actually floating, and that seems to be absolutely fine. And I think it was a good job really that I did pull this off, because underneath this is the needle that was completely stuck. Now this needle here actually operates properly. This gasket, however, is very, very crusty and fragile.
So once I got my sophisticated fuel system set up, I use a little hand pumper squeegee McThinger just to pump some fuel through the lines to make sure I've got no blockages. I can tell there are no blockages due to the amount of fuel that's spilling out of the cup and all onto the engine.
And in an absolute turnout for the books, I've got two strips of metal. These are from the old Rover that I used to have. They might have been from the brake calipers. It bridges that gap between there and there just absolutely perfectly, so that when I move this top mechanism, it actually moves all of that. Perfect.
So with my ultra sophisticated fuel system set up, combined with the fact that I believed I had spark, it was basically time to start the car and drive her straight to Pebble Beach.
I've got no idea, have I? So let's just, I don't know, stand back.
Well, that sounds healthy. Oh, what does that mean? Battery, the battery's fully charged because I just charged it. I think this starter is going on us, isn't it? Yeah, you know how I know the starter is going? Because it is smoking. So it's not the easiest to see, but I've cleaned all of the grounds up, all of the bare metal there. I've cleaned it all up around there, but now I've got a good ground again there. So let me just tighten that up and we'll go again. Okay, that sounded better, but I'm a little bit concerned by the sound of the engine. There's a nice gallop there, that which I think from just watching multiple YouTube videos means that things are broken. Chapter 3, compression. That might be part of the problem. 50 psi. Cylinder 3. $40 psi. Oh my word. 40 psi. You can't do anything for 40 psi these days, not with inflation. Okay, so this can definitely help explain why I'm having trouble starting this car. So cylinder 1, nice and healthy at 130, but just look at cylinders 2 and 4, got 50 and 40 psi respectively, and then number 6 isn't looking too healthy either with 80 psi. So according to the internet, from my research, it shows that the things that can cause low compression on cylinders are worn piston rings, a dodgy head gasket, or inlet and exhaust valves not opening and closing properly, or sealing, actually, not opening or closing, but actually sealing properly. Okay, so what I've just done now is I just squirted some oil down into the 3 bad cylinders, and what happened on cylinder 2 is that it jumped from 50 psi to 75. Piston 4, it jumped from 40 to 80 psi, and on piston 6 from 80 to 100 psi. So I'm guessing that means then that the issue is with the piston rings on those affected cylinders. I'm not entirely sure how you fix that. I do know that actually getting a car running again will kind of unstick the pistons, but I think that's what my issue is now. What I am going to do now though, I think, is I am just going to bung the spark plugs back in the holes, and because I do have higher compression, albeit because there's now oil in the cylinders, give that a go now, just trying to fire it one more time, just see if I've got just enough compression just to roar it into life, you know? Come on, old girl, let's go. Go. Well, that's the closest we've gotten, actually. Oh, the battery's going. Great. Come on, do something. Come on, old girl, just kick into life. Yes! And these theatrics just went on and on and on and on. I just couldn't get the car to fire. And I was beginning to enter, you know, the madman territory where you do the same thing again and again and expect a different result. So at this point, I just had to take a step back and start going back through the basics again. Do I actually have spark? I told you we'd get back onto it. Chapter 1, Spark Revisited. So I hooked up my little Sparker tester ruin tester device, and it was patently obvious right from the very beginning that I just wasn't getting spark. What a surprise. So then I whipped out the multimeter and I just subjected the whole ignition system to a thorough test. I was getting 12 volts into the coil, I was getting 12 volts out of the coil on the low tension side into the distributor, and then one of the little flappy points, when the points are open, was also getting 12 volts. So I know everything was good there. As I rotated the engine, I could see that when the points were opening and closing, there was no spark between the points. And this was perplexing to me because this is a new set of points and a new condenser. I adjusted the points gap as per the Haynes manual, but still no joy. And I'm going to be honest with you, this really, really hurt my brain. I did a load more research on my phone. I got stuck right into my electrics textbook, and I even had a lay down. But I just could not, for the life of me, work out why I was not getting spark at the points. What a faff. I have just been going around the houses with this. I have got it though, we now have spark. So everything is reassembled again. But in there, what I've actually got, so here's the new points and condenser that I bought, that I did fit. That's obviously now not in there. In there is the original points, but not the original condenser. So what I think has happened, that's the original condenser. That's the condenser that came with the new all of that stuff. This old condenser is broken. This new condenser is broken. And then it just so happens that for another project that I'm working on for the channel, I bought another points and condenser set, and I robbed the condenser off of that and put it in there, and then I got spark. Oh, so I spent the best part of 2 hours just going around the houses trying to work out what on earth was going on. I had my test lead out, I was testing this, that. I flipping got this, I was testing the resistance of this spanner. I was checking for continuity in the radiator. It just got absolutely out of hand and it was very dull and boring. But we do now have spark. The only problem I have now is that when you try to turn the engine over, it's very slow. This starter is incredibly weak. I've cleaned up all those grounds that you've seen, and it's still just weak. So I've got a feeling that I'm gonna have to be taking the starter motor off and kind of rebuilding it, taking it apart and just cleaning it, more than likely, is what I mean by a rebuild. Just to see if I can get any more life into that, because I don't think she's got enough power to turn the engine over now and to, you know, kick it up and then whoo, and it's, you know what I mean? Chapter 4, the starter. Secret weapon. A secret weapon. So I've got a secret weapon, and I thought, whilst I am firing the literal parts cannon at this car, it wouldn't hurt to go ahead and make this purchase. This is a remanufactured Powerlight starter motor for this car. Really wasn't that expensive either. This was under £100. I saw it on eBay and I thought, you know what, just grab it. Who knows what real difference it's gonna make, but I'm hoping it does just spin the engine over a bit quicker and with a bit more consistency than the old manky unit that's on it already. And the hope is that this new starter can just go where the other starter kind of just goes beep, 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 beep. I've also got a couple of other secret weapons, and that would be a can of Easy Start and some of this Wins Supercharge oil treatment, which apparently helps increase compression. We shall put that to the test. And my other secret weapon is this can of Easy Start. I mean, you saw me going on the throttle for the carb and dumping fuel straight down into the carb. I could just be putting way too much in. The fuel needs to go into the cylinders as more of like an atomized vapor rather than just pure liquid. So that's probably what I've been doing. Okay, so I've been under the car for what feels like the millionth time. You can see I've got the new starter fitted there. And so what I'm gonna do right now, got the spark plugs out of 2 and 4. And what I'm going to do is I just want to turn the engine over, firstly just to test that starter's obviously working, and hope, just absolutely hope that it is actually a little bit stronger than the old one that I've pulled off. And also because like I said, I squirted oil down into those cylinders. So I just want to see if there's any left in there by turning the engine over. Okay, 2 immediate observations. Number 1, there was loads of oil coming out. Probably hit the camera. Yes, it did, went all over my camera. So that was a smart move. And the second observation is that starter is definitely stronger. Right, so let's add some of this supercharge to the engine. And this is just like golden syrup. And it does explicitly say on this tin to add it to a warm engine. So obviously I've just gone ahead right here and added it to a cold, non-running engine. Spray into air intake for 1 to 2 seconds and then turn the engine over. Sure thing. So I need to make sure that the throttle is open. Is that 2 seconds? Nada. And that starter sounds just like the old one. Oh, which probably means that it's actually the battery that I'm using. Oh, great. All that work and money for nothing. Oh, I really thought that that was going to help sort me out, but what do I have to do to get this running? Whoa! Whoo! Go on! At this point, it was starting to get really frustrating. Well, they're pretty fouled up. It's got oil all over them. I mean, what did I expect? Oh, what do I have to do? What's wrong? I don't get it. I don't get it. We've got fuel, we've got air, we've got spark, and it's not popping and farting as if the timing's out. It's not doing anything. That's the problem. Is something clogged? Is the intake clogged? Is fuel getting into the engine? Chapter 5. Timing. Is the timing 180 degrees out? This is actually a problem that I faced on the last classic car I worked on, and it turned out that it was. But even though I wasn't actually getting any symptoms necessarily of the timing being 180 degrees out, such as spitting and farting out of the carb, I'm basically just clutching at straws, so I was willing to give it a go. And when I first opened up the bonnet on this car, it was clear that somebody had already been at the ignition system because all of the plugs were labelled. So I pulled off the distributor cap, switched the leads around 180 degrees and put it back together. Now I doubt very much this is the issue because these leads are now really stretched. I mean, I don't know, it doesn't look like they're supposed to be in that configuration, but I'm getting desperate at this point and I'll try anything. Okay, it's 180 out now. That's for sure. That is definitely 180 out. So I promptly switched it 180 degrees back. It turns out this newbie is for turning. I then consulted my Haynes manual once more, just to check that the static timing on this car was correct. Everything looked in order, so then I just basically settled for a little bit of fine tuning by twisting the distributor. Surely the answer to my problems lies in the timing. There's almost nothing left to check. Woo! I gave it a little bit of time in there. I'll give it a little bit more. I don't know what I mean when I say I'm giving it a bit of time in. That's just something I've heard people say online. Woo! Oh, it's so close. So close. Chapter 4. The starter revisited. So at this point I became convinced that the reason the car wasn't starting was because the engine simply wasn't spinning quick enough on startup to fire. So there was one more thing that I could try, and it was time to go and spend a little bit more money. Oh, the joy. Ladies and gentlemen, what you are looking at here is a Noco Boost XL, and this bad boy somehow puts out 1500 amps. So my plan was very simple: throw as many amps at the starter motor as I possibly could without burning it out, all with the aim of spinning the engine just fast enough so I can actually get it to fire. This is a last ditch effort to get this engine started. I have very little time left to work on this project, and if I don't get it fired now, it's all over. And this wasn't a good place to be, because now I was just acting out of pure frustration, and I took liberties with this starter motor again and again and again and again and again until the inevitable happened. That is the sound of the starter motor no longer operating. This is the new starter motor. It would appear to be locked up. The engine isn't locked up. I did just rotate it. on the crank bolt, and it's making some horrendous noises are coming from the starter motor. If I don't laugh, I'll cry. Genuinely, I'll cry. It was all working fine, and then it just went no. And I know this is another fresh battery. I've killed the new starter, which is a colossal waste of money and my time. I'm putting 100% down to user error, by the way. I'm not saying the starter is a bad starter. I'm saying the starter is being operated by a chimp. You just can't win them all. You just can't. This is only the second classic car I've ever had the absolute pleasure to work on, and I think this time it's just got me beat. I'm just a little too inexperienced to work out where I go from here. Sure, I could put the old starter motor back on, sure I could pull the head off of it, check to see if anything else is binding up the engine, check the timing gear, check this, check that, but quite frankly, after throwing the parts cannon at it, after throwing about 4 days of my life at it, I can't go on any longer. This car is 100% not economically viable. I have other commitments on the channel, other projects I need to move on to. So put in the comments below what you'd have done differently if you were me. Let me know where I could go from here. Maybe I'll revisit the car, I don't know. But until then, I'm gonna have to see you in the next one.